Windows no longer starts up, and on exactly that drive, there still happen to be some of your precious files you'd like to back up before you ultimately get rid of your damaged Windows installation. In today's video, I'm about to show you how to even create backups in emergency situations, even if Windows no longer boots. Additionally, I'll also guide you through on how to create backups of any of your drives and how to clone Windows onto a different drive if you, let's say, wish to upgrade to a new SSD without having to reinstall Windows and all of your programs and games. Some of today's processes are in fact free to use, other things are only available in the paid version. This video is brought to you by EaseUs, today's sponsor. First, I'm going to show you how to create normal, regular backups when there are no software issues. Feel free to skip this part if you so desire. I've prepared two SSDs here, one being the source SSD filled with about 6 GB of data, the other being the target SSD onto which we'll be transferring the same data. Actually, we could do this manually by hand by simply drag and dropping all those folders onto our target drive. Speaking from experience, that's suboptimal to many of you, especially when having to deal with backups on a larger scale involving several drives. This is where the EaseUs To Do backup tool comes into play. You're free to use the trial version. Needless to say, there certainly are good alternatives out there, but it should make sense that I'm going with my sponsor's solution today. We are being greeted by this nice and clean user interface. In my case, we are for now looking at the trial version. That one only allows for normal, ordinary backups and recovery. Cloning and system transfers are only available with the licensed version. Furthermore, for our use cases, that is if we have the desire to do so and have no trust issues, we could create an EaseUs account and for 30 days make use of 250 GB of free cloud storage. So let's create a backup now. Obviously, a destination for where all my backups go has automatically been set. Most likely, the tool on default decides to use a drive that has most of its capacity still free. Needless to say, you can change that within the settings all to your liking. Let's get started with our backup. We are now free to choose from either specific files, a complete drive, the whole operating system, or potentially some app data. For today's video, I'll be going with a drive backup, which is why I'm selecting my source SSD and allow the files of that drive to be saved into my set backup folder for now. Once that process is done, we can navigate to that backup folder to spot a single PBD file by EaseUs. It has all of our files in one whole package, which can be perfect if you want to have your backups on several machines at once. So next up, we want to extract files out of that PBD file. The exact drive name is already being displayed, and here we can in fact pick out very specific files when in the file mode and extract those onto a chosen drive. I, for one, am going all in and decided to copy the whole partition, therefore select my target SSD. It should be clear that the existing partition of my target SSD will have to be formatted, meaning all data that's still on it will be deleted. Now the next step is to set a drive layout, that is, if you have a specific layout in mind. Otherwise, AutoFit would be the best choice in most cases. Following that, the backup process can now finally begin. That can take a while depending on the backup size. Once that's done, you'll see my target SSD has now been renamed into source SSD as well and comes equipped with the same set of files. Everything has been successfully transferred as expected. The PBD file still remains and can still be used, so we could for instance extract and recover specific files and/or partitions identically on other systems. This way I could easily get the files of that backed up partition onto a different drive or system or even onto my desktop. This does not pose any problem and allows for a bit of automation as far as the backup process is concerned. I find that pretty intriguing if you wish to use software to get that kind of job done. But what if we want to retrieve files from a damaged/corrupted Windows installation? Because the files are still there. It's just Windows that no longer is booting up properly due to a blue screen of death or something similar. This is where one would be creating a emergency disk or emergency USB flash drive before encountering such issues, or one simply creates such a emergency USB flash drive when it's needed on a different system. The easiest to do backup emergency solution can be created in form of a ISO file, a bootable USB drive, or burn a CD or DVD. Most likely, one would be creating the USB drive. We can also add specific drivers here. All that works flawlessly even with the software's free version. It's just cloning and system transfer options that are not available in the free version. Once that USB drive has been made bootable by EaseUS, we can now go ahead and restart this system and act as though Windows doesn't start up. Now, before we allow the system to start, we'll have to change the boot order. Depending on the PC and motherboard, that process can differ a little bit. Sometimes you'll have to enter the BIOS directly by hitting the delete key on a desktop PC most of the time. It's important to make sure you actually boot from the USB drive that has been modified by EaseUS. After a while, we'll boot into a WinPE operating system with EaseUS to do backup. In here, we're being offered basically the same functionality as in the standard regular Windows version. As a matter of fact, the tool also comes equipped with a few other neat, useful emergency solutions, but it's kept fairly bare bones and minimalistic as far as functionality is concerned. Since I've already created a backup into that backup directory beforehand, I can easily take the shortcut and make use of that without having to rely on Windows. All you have to do is select your desired drive. That can either be an internal or external one. In my case, it's external, connected via USB. After a while, the process is completed. Now, to make sure my data actually landed onto my target SSD, I'll check that real quick, and in fact, that's exactly the case. It sure does work like a charm. So let's get to our third use case here. I'll show you how to, for instance, clone or transfer your Windows 11 SSD onto a completely different SSD. In the end, you could just unplug and uninstall your old SSD and start using your new SSD as if nothing ever happened. That kind of procedure is only available in the paid version of today's software, so you'd have to get a license for that first. In EaseUS to do backup, we choose the option System Clone and then select the drive, the SSD, we wish to clone Windows to. I'm once again selecting my target SSD. Of course, you should make sure beforehand you can actually store your old SSD's data onto the new SSD as far as capacity is concerned. Additionally, the cloning process can be optimized for SSDs. In theory, we could also go ahead and create a portable Windows USB drive to make use of when on the go. You just follow the steps, and by doing so, any existing partitions on that new SSD will have to be deleted. That should be clear. Here we are once more given the option to customize our drive layout. Autofit, as said before already, is usually the best option. Unfortunately, we are already being stopped. We need a license key to get the job done. Once you've entered one, the cloning begins in no time. Depending on the SSD speed, size, and how much data there's actually on your SSD, this could take a while. Once that process is completed, within the Windows File Explorer, we are already getting to see our cloned drive, already renamed into Windows 11 here too, and in theory, possessing the exact same data along with the operating system. To give you a bit of proof, my current Windows installation is running on a 1TB Kingston SSD. So it's time to shut this system down and boot into the BIOS to change the boot order. Usually you'd now unplug and or uninstall your old SSD from your system, but for the sake of today's video, I'm not going to do that. Having arrived within the UEFI BIOS, you now clearly can see my 1TB Kingston M.2 NVMe SSD. Right below of it, a 512GB Kingston SATA SSD, onto which we've just now cloned Windows. All we have to do now is to find the boot manager or boot order and select the new SSD. Following that, we save the settings and allow the PC to boot up as usual. It all seems to be working like a charm in my case, and it's obvious Windows does not run from my 1TB SSD anymore, but instead from my new 512GB SATA SSD, something disk management is able to prove. So all has worked out perfectly without any hiccups. The Ease Us To Do Backup tool certainly gets its job done. I personally find it to be a little too simple and primitive for my taste. I'd prefer having more functionality, but those that rather prefer having a simple, straightforward piece of software certainly would enjoy working with Ease Us To Do Backup. Even the free trial version already offers pretty respectable functionality. With that said, thank you all for watching, and I wish you the best of success backing up your data.